Good afternoon, fourth grade. This is the day you've all been waiting for. We are going to talk about the Egyptian gods and goddesses today. Before we begin, let's activate our background knowledge and respond to this quick right. It says, what did you already know about Egyptian gods and goddesses from what Mr. Jones has told you? I know you've been working with your Egyptian pyramids, and you've been writing your own stories about gods and goddesses. So silently write down 2 to 3 sentences about what you already know about Egyptian gods and goddesses. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to get started. Our focus question for today is, how does Egyptian mythology explain how the gods were created? Before we get started figuring out how the gods were created, we have 3 vocabulary words we need to go over. The first one is moisture. That's just the presence of liquid. Draw a line to this water. The second one is propel. That means to push or drive forward. That's this guy's being propelled upward, but that's the same thing. And third, a triad, that's a group of 3 people or anything containing 3 things. Great. We're going to read pages 1 and 2 of your text. Silently follow along. First, we're looking for evidence of how does the author describe the cosmos in the first paragraph. Be ready to underline evidence about the cosmos. In the beginning, before there was time, water spread in every direction, though there was no direction really, because there was no up, no down, no east, no west, no inside, no outside. This water lay cold and colorless, a wet nothingness that hummed, none, none. This was the cosmos, hardly more than empty chaos. There was but a single entity, so there was no question of order. The cosmos was ordered perforce. The order of a dot, a circle, a sphere, without beginning or end. Utter consistency, perfect order. Let's go back and think about, how does the author describe the cosmos? Well, we know the cosmos was wet nothingness. It was called none. It was empty chaos. Make sure you're underlining these things. It was ordered perforce. So the cosmos was perfect order, and it looked like water, felt like water. Silently write this down in number 1. According to the text, the cosmos was perfect order, comma, empty chaos, comma, and it looked and felt like water. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for number 2. Now we're looking for evidence for how was this order disturbed, and what was the result of the disturbance. Second paragraph. But something there is that doesn't like order. Order can be tolerated temporarily, but on and on like that, infinite order, how unutterably intolerable. Boring, really. A hint came. A slight poke. Underline that. A slight poke. Then another. A little firmer. A full-fledged beat now. More of them. Underline that. Insistent beats, breaking up the hum, moving the water imperceptibly at first, then in tiny waves, then bigger ones, huge ones now, tsunamis, yet still in a pattern, still ordered, one after another, at regular intervals. Thump, 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 thump. All right, let's get, 2A. Well, we know the order was disturbed because something started to poke the cosmos. Something started to poke at the water, and it created beats and waves. Silently write this down for 2A. Something started to poke the water harder and harder, until there were waves that made the thump, thump, thump sound. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for 2B. Let's keep reading to figure out what was the result, what happened next. A heart formed around this pulse, for every rhythm evokes an origin. Underline that sentence. That is what happened. And 2B, a heart was created. And in that heart nestled a thought. After all, some think with a head and others think with a heart. This was definitely a heart though. Ah, the first and profound disorder, thought. So you need to add to 2B. A heart was created as well as a thought. So the heart began to think. Go to the second page. And this is called an excerpt, and we're not going to read this excerpt right now. Instead, we're going to go to the larger text underneath the excerpt for boxes 3 and 4. And we want to know, what effect does the thought have on the cosmos? And I didn't give you guys lines for some reason, so you can just write it underneath, okay? What effect does the thought have on the cosmos? So because the heart is thinking, what happens next? Let's read. This single thought rubbed faster and faster until it warmed and finally ignited into language. Silently underline that. The thought created language. Write that down for 3A. The thought created language. And then the next part, we want to know, what does the creation of language cause? What happens next? The god Ra sprang to life with a word already in his mouth. More bubbled up. Words now crowded his mouth. They trampled his tongue and pushed against his teeth, his lips. He had so many words to enunciate. The need hammered at him. From that very need came lungs and a voice box and muscles that made it all move. Ra shouted the first word over and over, and these shouts rose in molten mass up and spewed forth through the waters of Nun in a fiery explosion. That was the first firmament, the mound of creation that Ra called Ben. It all started with a single tip like a volcano mound. Ra stood upon it in triumph and knew he must speak more, for in his voice lay all creation. He must create. He must never stop creating. So let's go back to 3B. What does the creation of language cause? Well, if we go back in this first paragraph, we know that after language, it says the god Ra sprang to life with a word already in his mouth. So that means that the language created Ra. The language created the god Ra. And then in our text, it asks us to describe Ra. Again, I didn't give you lines for some reason, so just write it in this blank space below. And it says describe Ra. And let's go back and underline some evidence for him. He had words already in his mouth, and he just had this need to speak these words. And when he did speak these words, he created land. It says it was like a volcano. And it says, for in his voice lay all creation. So that means, Ra was born with words already in his mouth, and when he spoke those words, he created things. Write that down for 4A. And then 4B asks us, what is the author's purpose for writing the first 2 pages of the story? We're thinking, well, the author's purpose is either to persuade, inform, or entertain. And I think the author is trying to entertain us with this story about how the god Ra was created. The author is telling us an entertaining story about how the god Ra was created. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for your paragraph. It says, how does Egyptian mythology explain how the earth was created? And instead of, so who created the earth? How do you know? Based on this text, not based on your own personal beliefs, but according to Egyptian mythology. Ready, set, go.